Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Domrat. I am the Adult Programs Coordinator here at the VMFA. Thank you so much for attending our August 3 and 30. It is my honor today to introduce my colleague Izzy Fuqua, the Interpretation and Digital Project Coordinator, as well as the Educator for the Modern and Contemporary Collection here at VMFA. We would love for this to be, kind of a conversation. So as Izzy speaks, please feel free to throw in any questions you have into the Q&A box. Depending on how Izzy you're feeling, maybe you'll address them as we go, or we'll definitely talk at the end. So please feel free to chime in when you would like. But with that, I will pass it off to you, Izzy.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie. And yes, please give me your thoughts, comments, questions. I would love to hear from you. I chose this topic because of my interest in contemporary art and because all of these objects are recently on view at the museum in new and unexpected places. So we're talking about contemporary art, but we won't be looking in the 21st century gallery today. We'll actually be going to our South Asian galleries, the court outside of the East Asian galleries, and then an entrance to the museum that kind of brings you right into the European art collection. And we'll look at moments where curators have worked together to place works by contemporary artists in this setting to reveal new context about the artist's inspiration, about what they're interested in, about what message they're trying to tell. So we are going to jump right in with our first work, which will be in our South Asian art collection, specifically the Himalayan galleries. Now, this is a slightly outdated look, but I wanted to show it to you because it does have works of art by the contemporary artist Saran Sherpa, who we're going to focus on today. And you may recognize that name because he was featured prominently in our 2019 special exhibition, Awaken. That's this work of art kind of on the wall here. Not sure if you can see my cursor, but this kind of multi-paneled work is by him, and that was the first work to enter our collection by him. And then in 2022, we had a mid-career retrospective of his work in Saran Sherpa Spirits. And so that's the image you're seeing on your right. It has a work of sculpture by him, and then at back, a more traditional, what's called a Tonka painting, which is what we'll look at today. So we are going to focus on Saran Sherpa's work, Fly High, which you're seeing on the screen right now. This is a metal leaf acrylic and ink on canvas, but it's kind of like a smallish scale look at this subject. And by comparison, I want you to look at the detail that we're seeing in this work, the level of intricacy and the incredible talent and skill that he takes to create these figures. And by doing that, I want us to look at a more traditional style that he also works in. So what you're seeing here is Mahakala, a deity, and this is a more traditional take. But by comparing the two, we can see similarities. So we see a very similar figure that's repeated in the work Fly High. You can see it kind of the face here. It's this grimace. It's very fearsome. It has heads along the top of the head. So we can see that figure being carried over from the traditional look to a more contemporary work of art. Now, Saran Sherpa is a contemporary artist. He is Nepalese born, but did move to the United States, specifically the West Coast. And when he arrived in the United States, he kind of took a look around and said, well, gosh, they're doing a lot of what I grew up doing, which is he was trained by his father to work in a very traditional style. So the work that you're seeing on screen here, you recognize this one. This is the work of Saran Sherpa, but then next to it is a very traditional Tonka painting, or a painting that would show a deity, a god, or a mandala, kind of a diagram for the cosmos, the universe. universe. And so this work is one done by his father, who was a master of this style. And he took it upon himself when Saran Sherpa was 13 to teach him this tradition, to teach him what type of materials to use, how to apply them to the textile in this case. So Saran Sherpa had been kind of embedded in this artistic culture from a young age. But when he moved to the United States, he was continuing that practice and seeing an interesting similarity to, in Nepal, they were interested in deities and icons. But in the US, we are interested in icons too, in people or motifs that are repeated over and over again. And he cites specifically being interested in Andy Warhol. And this idea that Warhol would repeat famous figures over and over again. You may think with VMFA's collection, the triple Elvis. So repeating this celebrity over and over again. And so Sherpa took that in and said, well, this is something that's important to this culture. Let me see what I can do with that here. And we start to see this type of work where he is repeating things over and over again. Here we're seeing that Mahakala figure 1, 2, 3, 4 times. But things that he's done to change it and contemporize it, he's kind of made the figure a little bit more active. Look at how those figures' arms are outstretched. They're in this crouching stance as if they're about to leap off the canvas and into our space. They also have their index fingers extended, kind of extending that energy outward. And so taking note of the title here, Fly High, that is supposed to get back to this idea of kind of bursting with energy, that these figures are about to kind of leap into the air and fly high. That is reiterated by the details of butterflies throughout the canvas. This work of art was made in response to Sherpa's belief that the Nepalese youth would be able to kind of overcome and bring Nepal out of a place of great devastation after the earthquake that occurred a couple years prior. So this is really his reflection on his observations of Nepalese youth in the area and specifically their entrepreneurial spirit, the idea that they can look to themselves to create new ideas that could bring income into their area. So his belief that it will rise above the rubble, the ashes, and kind of be born again. Someone is commenting that the title of the work is so befitting, and I 100% agree, Patricia. It is this kind of swirling cacophony of energy and motion, and when you learn that kind of backstory behind it, it does feel very fitting. So here we've started with the work of Saran Sherpa, who again trained very classically in this traditional style of Thangka painting, but was inspired to kind of expand upon that. So he's still using those skills. He's even using some of the same materials, but he's kind of flipping the code a little bit and updating it to reflect his contemporary life. So the next work of art that we're going to see is another artist who is inspired by her family, much like Saran Sherpa, as that's important to his work. So we will move on to our Cochrane Court in VMFA's museum. Specifically, this court is a shared space between our ancient art, ancient Greece, Rome, Egypt, and then East Asian art. So here, I hope you're seeing just the scale of this work of art at the distance here. It's kind of situated between these two columns. We can see an ancient sculpture kind of to the left, but it's very large. This is a shaped canvas. That's why you're kind of seeing it almost as if it's floating on the wall. It has been cut and shaped into this shape of a portrait, right? A portrait of a person, specifically the title is Grandma. So here we are again. It's called Grandma. It's by an artist named Hung Liu. She did pass recently in 2021, but she was born in China just 2 years after the start of the the Chinese Communist Revolution. So her childhood and coming of age was marked with great hardship. She actually worked for a time in an agrarian labor camp, but her family was always very supportive of her interest in art and art making and techniques. But growing up in this place, she had a very specific way she could create art, and it was the way that the government said was appropriate. So in the back of her mind, while she is creating and learning a very traditional style of creation, she's also keeping in the back of her mind that there could be more to this. And so when she emigrated to the United States, again, to the West Coast, she was able to kind of free up and think a little bit more about what she wanted to create and how she wanted to show that. And specifically, she wanted to reflect upon the people that she had seen in China and the people who were living a very hard life, other workers, other people that were maybe beaten down by their circumstance. But this in particular is an image of her grandmother, hence the title, Grandma. And this is a photo of that person. And photos became very important to Liu. She, during her time growing up, a lot of her photographs were lost just due to circumstance of the life that they led. So the few that remained became very treasured to her. And this is one of those. So she often reused images in her work as inspiration, but also in the physical art making process. And just looking closely at this image, I don't know about you, but I see a real sense of inner strength and power, composure. Also, just this sense that this is a person who lived a very full life and maybe a hard life. So the other thing we might see here is what's placed upon the figure. So let's get a closer look at that. Here we're seeing some details of the image. So the work is in the center here, but the larger detail is showing you some flowers at the bottom, this kind of very traditional chrysanthemum flower that you might see on some Chinese ceramics. But also you can see in that kind of aqua colored paint, it's the suggestion of mountains and trees and maybe water, with the orange ink showing pagodas or architecture. So these are scenes that are from an area called Mount Qianshan. And what these reference for Hung Liu is her grandfather. So the portrait is of her grandmother, but these details reference her grandfather, who was a scholar of this place. He dedicated his life to learning about it and knowing it. And so what Hung Liu did is she did the portrait in 1993 and then kind of put it away for a little bit and returned to it in 2013 and added these details on top. The other details that I'm showing you here are these kind of wooden architectural panels that are in the kind of upper chest area. Those are showing some traditional Buddhist performance scenes, which again is a reference to the culture from which this derives. The last thing I wanted to show, just demonstrate with this image is the way in which she's rendering the figure. It's not very lifelike. And what I mean by that is it's very dulled down in color. It's almost as if we are looking at a photograph. We aren't looking at the figure in a hyper-realistic form. And that's very quintessential of this artist's work. She often sepia-toned things or would apply a layer of linseed oil is the agent that would be added to oil paint to dilute it, to kind of move that color around and spread it across the canvas easier. And this was an intentional effort on Liu's part to kind of create this, what she would call a veil between the figure in the picture and us, the viewer. And that's intentional on her part because she wants these to feel like memories, distant memories. These people aren't here with us now. They lived these lives separate from us. And that kind of dripping, let me see if I can go back to that detail for you, that kind of dripping of the paint, the dulling of the intensity of color, that's meant to represent that separation. And I think personally, I think it adds to the kind of strength of the character too. It shows this kind of life lived, this worn exterior, but again, kind of revealing that strength of person. So again, here we're looking at the work of Hung Liu, her work Grandma, which is newly installed in our Cochrane Court, just adjacent to the East Asian galleries, where we might see some of these things on more traditional works next door. So from here, we've seen artists who are working in a traditional technique, artists who are referencing their familial heritage. What we're going to look at now is an artist who actually wants us to question history altogether, wants us to think, well, is that exactly how that happened? And we're going to see how where the curator has placed this work is kind of challenging us to take those questions. So this is our 1936 entrance into the museum just off of North Arthur Ashe Boulevard. If you were to enter in this way and go up the stairs, you would be entering into our European art galleries, Baroque art, 18th century, Renaissance, really classical stuff, and just an incredible collection. And specifically on either side of this is an installation called the Saunders Collection. And that's really important here because we're talking about 17th and 18th century European art, and that's where this artist comes in. So what you're seeing is a before shot. This chandelier that was here was removed in the last 2 weeks, and it was replaced with this piece by Fred Wilson. It's called No Way But This, and it was made in 2013. It is created out of Murano glass, which is important. He collaborated with a Murano glass blower to create this chandelier. And right off the bat, I hope you're noticing a big difference, the first being just color. Here we're seeing kind of a gilt chandelier. It almost appears transparent, and it's very light and airy. And we automatically see it different with Wilson's interpretation here. But what exactly is Wilson telling us? So in the adjacent gallery, specifically in a Dutch art collection, like a presentation of Dutch artists, is this work by Maton, and the title is An African Soldier Leaning Out of a Window and Holding a Flag. Now, this work of art features a person of color, but while that does happen in European art, we often don't get the identity of those people. We don't know who they are. That's not to say that that's not an overarching statement. There are people who are identified that are people of color, but this is a good example of the overwhelming majority. And so when Fred Wilson was actually visiting Venice, he was looking around at these collections and seeing people of color without identities and wanting to know why, wanting to understand why. And then he started to look at the decorative arts around him, things like chandeliers and mirrors and tables and chairs. And you know what he wasn't seeing is the color black. So he decided to kind of flip this narrative on its head and create a chandelier with the color black, which is not something that would have been done by the decorative arts masters of this time. And again, it is asking us to think, well, who were the Black people who lived during this time? What were their names? What were their stories? Let's look at some details of the chandelier. So just right off the bat, we're seeing this beautiful, deep black color throughout. It's not matte. It's very dimensional, and the way the light hits it, it's a very eye-catching piece to walk into. We're also seeing a lot of detail. It's very ornate. It's heavily decorated. It has different hanging implements. And then let's look closely at some of the light features that you can see. They are meant to recall a chalice shape. So you can see this kind of globe-like that has kind of light from within that is meant to reference a chalice, much like the one in the on the slide here. That's an object in our European art collection. So we can see this kind of opening. And this is where we can kind of start to unearth some of what the title means and his further inspiration. So Fred Wilson is a longtime sculpture artist, installation artist, but also a museum professional. Has worked with many museums to kind of look at the presentation of art and what are the narratives that aren't being told. So when he was invited to create a pavilion for the Venice Biennale, this big contemporary art show. He wanted to look at Venice. And so he created a suite of furniture, including a chandelier, not this one, but he created a suite of furniture that were created out of black glass. I see someone asking is how is the black color created? That's a glass blowing question. I'm not a glass blower myself. This chandelier is not painted. It is blown black glass. So if you look up glass blowing, it's how that kind of molten glass is colored and tinted. But yes, great question. It's not painted or applied after the fact. It is blown glass. But he created these black decorative objects, again trying to get at this idea of there were Black people in Europe. What were their names? What were their identities? And then he actually centered it around Shakespeare, specifically in this case, in this artwork's case, the tragedy of Othello. Othello being the Moor from Venice. And this work of literature is really important because it's one of the only that provides kind of nuance and ambiguity to the race of Othello. It's largely understood that he was a person of color. I have a work of art on screen here from the Folger Shakespeare Library in DC that shows Othello. And again, he has that darker complexion. So it's understood that he's a person of color. But it's not outright said. So essentially, in Othello, the climax of the play is that Othello was given poor information that his wife Desdemona was an adulteress, that she had cheated on him. And so in a fit of rage, he had made a plan to poison her cup, specifically the chalice, to kill her in revenge. And he ended up strangling her instead. So the chalice didn't go through, but that's where we see the chalice shape. And then how we get the title of this piece is the last line that Othello speaks. Just before committing suicide, when he realizes that Desdemona was not unfaithful to him, he says, "No way but this, killing myself to die upon a kiss." So No Way But This is the title of the work, kind of getting back to that main figure of Othello. And we kind of see that climax here in this image again from the Folger Shakespeare Library. So that is, and how I ended it with our in-person group is, we were actually standing, let me go back to my installation photo here. We were standing on the far balcony, and that really affords you the opportunity to exit into the Saunders collection, to go into French art and take a look at some of the beautiful tables and mirrors and other decorative art objects that are on display, and notice how there's no black. There's no color black there. Or you could exit out the Flemish Baroque kind of section, and you could look at that image of an unnamed African man, and you can kind of think about, well, what story isn't there, and why isn't it there? And how is Fred Wilson's work being situated here, helping me have that conversation and talk about that narrative? So if you're able to come to the museum, I hope you are, and I hope you can come see these 3 works of art. now on display. Again, we had Saran Sherpa in our Himalayan galleries. We looked specifically at Fly High, but there's actually a number of his contemporary works on view right now. 2D works, but also 3D. So I highly recommend coming and taking a look at that, seeing what connections you can make between the traditional objects there and his contemporary practice. And then we saw Hung Liu's portrait of grandma and saw how her familial heritage kind of played a role in her inspiration. And then we ended with Fred Wilson's No Way But This, a new installation in our 1936 wing, which kind of welcomes you in, but also kind of challenges you to think about the narratives that art history tells us and what narratives aren't being told. So with that, I think I left some time for questions if there are any. Happy to take them or comments or thoughts or feedback on the work we've seen today.
That was great. Thank you so much, Izzy.
Yeah,
Yes,
of
if you have
course.
any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A and I'd be happy to read them out for you.
I do need to brush up on glass blowing technique. I don't know a lot about it. So it looks incredible. I should say that Fred Wilson is not a glass blower himself. He collaborated with somebody. So, he's like the conceptual, the idea, but he did go to the expert to say what he wanted done.
I popped a link in the Q&A about black glass. Glass blowing is very complex, so it doesn't answer all the questions, but it gives you a little background about black glass.
Yeah.
So we have a question. For grandmother, I am imagining the painter's melancholy reflected, such as grandmother's body is like the motherland. Is that possible?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I think that's a great observation. This kind of I was talking about strength and inner repose, but she does have this feeling of heaviness, like a weightedness. And I think growing up in China during the time that Hung Liu did, it was a difficult place to be. And there's no doubt about that. If you look at her and kind of her body of work, they are not uplifting images. They are looking at kind of the fringes of society, the people who were left behind, who were considered unessential. And I do think there is a melancholy to her work. And that kind of dripping, that treatment of that paint, I think that also gets to that feeling of sadness. Yeah, I would agree with that.
There's one more question. Can this piece be considered a sculpture?
Grandma, I think is
Grandma,
what we're talking about,
yes.
the sculpted canvas.
Mhm.
It's not meant to be seen in the round. And it's not very, I guess I shouldn't call it three-dimensional because those architectural elements is what they're called, those wooden panels. Um, I really see it as a canvas. It's kind of a shaped canvas, which has a long history in contemporary art. There are other artists who worked in this shaped canvas concept, but I think it is sculptural. But I wouldn't, you wouldn't take it off the wall and kind of walk all around it. So it's not three-dimensional in that same sense. Definitely mixed media, though. There's a lot of media going on.
And the way it's painted, it does feel like she's almost coming off the wall, but
Oh, it's incredible. When I
it's
walked through the court the first time and saw it, I mean, we had been looking at a digital image for so long, and then I saw it. It's monumental. It's incredible to see in person.
all right. Well, thank you, Izzy. Thank you again, everyone. We'll see you next month.
Bye.
Bye.